Hey there YouTube, welcome to Big Mike Beard Wisdom. So today we'll be tackling something that needs to be fixed on the Saturn Astra, and basically it's one of my favorite aftermarket modifications if you can make it. For this I'm just trying to fix the stock stuff and that's either an anti-roll bar or a sway bar. And for the Astra, basically we're trying to tackle the Endlinks. On the Saturn Astra, you can see right here is an Endlink. So this connects to this right here. That's your sway bar or anti-roll bar. Different people have different names for them, but basically it acts as a spring between the two sides of the car, and it attaches in some way, shape, or form to something that follows the wheel. So as the wheel moves up and down, your strut moves up and down. So this moves up and down on both sides as each wheel moves up and down. Now, by having the sway bar connecting them, what it does is as this side moves up, it applies a certain amount of pressure through that spring to the other side to likewise move up. So if that was like a straight solid bar, it would be like having a straight axle. So as one wheel moves up, the other wheel will move up exactly the same. By having the bar be a spring, it allows only a certain amount of pressure to be applied. So this is where a lot of times people will take a factory sway bar and remove it and put in a thicker, heavier duty sway bar, because the heavier and stronger the spring pressure is, the more it'll try and keep one wheel's movement the same as the other wheel's movement. So this will make you corner flatter. So for example, if you went into a left-hand turn, the car leans to the right because all the weight of the car is shifting over. So the wheel on this side is essentially getting applied up higher into the body, which causes the car to rotate and like lean or sway or roll, depending on how you want to put it. Now, by having the anti-roll bar, you apply pressure to this wheel, which shifts things a little bit this way and helps flatten it out in the corner. So they won't 100% remove body roll, but they'll help with it depending on their strength. So this seems like a Minnesota car. So it's definitely going to need a quick shot of penetrating oil. Just to make sure that things aren't horrible. But let's go to the other side real quick. So I've already removed the Endlink on this side, so you can get a little bit better view of the sway bar and where it attaches. But the reason why I had to remove it is because the old one actually broke. So I'm not 100% sure when the old one broke, but not having an Endlink that's intact on both sides means that sway bar wasn't really doing anything. So it's really going to be interesting when I'm all done as how the handling characteristics will change. But basically, here's the old Endlink. This is the one part at the bottom. Here's the part at the top, and as you can see, this part here came out, and it's more than likely due to maybe the boot tore and got a little bit of water in there, which resulted in rust. That rust probably caused accelerated wear up here, which changed this from a nice round hole to an oblong hole, and eventually allowed this to escape where it's supposed to be. So much like a ball joint or a tie rod end, this is a ball and socket kind of situation. So this would be much more rounder. And you can see that rust really changed its shape. But that ball would live inside of that socket and allow some flex and movement. So as the suspension moves up and down, or you turn the car, it allows this to rotate without binding. Then, here's the new parts I ordered. So basically I went with Delphi. Order them off of Rock Auto real quick. And for these, you always want to make sure that they look like they're about the same. Sometimes there's minor updates. And sometimes there's complete like redos. So there might be a situation where maybe a company figured out that, hey, the plastic ones maybe break or something. You should really go with the metal one. So in this situation, I went with the factory style plastic ones. And then I'm replacing both of them on both sides because this one broke up here, but the other one also has a little bit of a knock. So I'm willing to bet the other one's probably wearing too and may fail soon. And generally you replace suspension components in pairs, because everywhere this one's been, this one, well, everywhere the driver's side has been, the passenger side's been there as well. So this is the old broken one. So the original one on the driver's side, this was wore out. This moves fairly easily, so not very stiff. Passenger side, this is the other side, non-broken. This moves really stiff. So this side might be all right, because like, well, maybe not, because this moves pretty easy too. But this side was about to break. So you can see this side was toast, and all that was holding this in place was more or less the tension from the boot to keep it in. So that pulls completely out. Of where it's supposed to be. So this can be a problem because when these disconnect and essentially starts roaming around, like this one essentially, this is moving around in your suspension as the sway bar moves up and down. So who knows where this is going. This may jab into the body, it may jab into a brake line, it may jab into something. If you were to look at this one real quick, you can see this boot's kind of far back compared to this. So on this one, the boot is all the way up on the shoulder. The boot is not on the shoulder here. So the other thing is that you can see the flat here. That allows you to kind of hook in with, in this instance, a 17mm wrench. That way you can hold it and turn it. But you can also see the remnants of where it had a little hex insert right here, but it's so rusty you can barely make it out. So essentially it should have this hex hole here, but there's so much rust it's gone or covered up. So with the new one, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to see what size this is. That way as you install it, you put a wrench over the nut, and then you can have something in here, so as you tighten this down, you're able to hold that still. That way you get proper torque on it. So I could probably go fairly in depth into how to install or remove these, but for every vehicle it's going to be a little bit different. But essentially, all you wind up doing is finding a way to put these back in. Normally, you may have to slide and re-angle these just so that you can put them back in place. So you can see there wasn't a big fight with that. All I had to do was just re-angle the bottom in the direction that was pointed just to get it to slip into there. And some cars are different than others, so they're not all going to be in this configuration. I don't particularly care for this configuration, mostly because this lower one is a bit of a pain in the butt. And that's due to its proximity to that control arm down there. So it's a little bit tight trying to get that in. And it's also a little bit of a pain in the butt trying to get this hex into the head of that in order to make sure everything's good and tight. But normally whenever you're going on, there's a chance that everything will tighten up and then the stud in the back kind of smashes into where it's going. And then you're able to put any kind of final torquing on the nut itself without needing to hold that section. To basically get this one started, it's easy enough just to kind of put it in like that. So you've got the wrench holding the nut. The ratchet is inside that hex point. And then you can just use the ratchet to tighten it. This is one of those situations though where you have the ratchet technically set to loosen because you're spinning the center while holding the nut stationary. And then if you know what your torque spec is, be sure to torque it to the proper torque. I'm just going to torque this to good and tight. Oh, there, good and tight. And sometimes if you wind up getting into a situation where stuff gets stuck, so like right now that hex is kind of stuck in place, go ahead and flip the direction you're taking it in and then just give it a little bump. Because especially with hexes, that shape, as you're torquing it, can slide around just a little bit, especially if you're not exactly sure as to what size you're supposed to be using. I'm using a 5mm on this one, because with it being a German car, I would expect it to be a metric size. And then this is pretty much what I meant about when, as you tighten it up, you won't need to hold that centerpiece anymore. So as it's starting to tighten up, I'm able to turn this without it affecting that ratchet. So the ratchet's not actually touching anything, and I'm not putting any pressure on it, but I'm still able to work the wrench and get a good torque on it. Oh, good and tight. All right, so both sides are now done. Everything's torqued down, so now we should be able to go ahead, slap the wheels back on, wash our hands, and give her a quick test, see if there's any improvement. So I just got back from doing the second test, and it did much better. So I don't know if pushed to its max, if it's gonna look like it did better, but honestly, that stock sway bar might not be one of those where it's, you know, really putting down a lot of pressure, but it's putting down enough pressure that like a lot of the low speed corners and just driving around town, it felt much more composed, much flatter, much more stable. Plus, by replacing this one with this bad end, I got rid of one of the weird noises in the car. So all in all, pretty happy with the change. Really glad that I replaced this and that this was found before there was a bigger problem, because nothing like having a completely broken suspension component floating around where it shouldn't be floating around. Depending on the parts, that can vary place to place. So depending on if you went high quality, low quality, you know, where you go with it, an improved design, a non-improved design, stock, factory style, it all depends. So we'll ignore parts. Normally labor to replace sway bar, anti-roll bar, Endlinks, whatever you want to call it. Basically looking at about half an hour a side, maybe 0.8 to do both sides. So let's call it about an hour. And if most shops are charging about $100 an hour, essentially doing it yourself, spending about an hour, maybe 30 minutes doing it yourself, save you about $100, maybe $50 if you want to give yourself a little bit of pay for that time. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to like and subscribe. I'll check you next time. So whenever you go into a current click. Just kidding. There we go. So this is the other side. It's already been removed. And I've actually been running this like this for about a week. The reason why I've been running this for like this for about a week,